Okay, so yeah, feel free to ask questions anytime. So we're going to finish the topic of Shabbos, and then we'll do marriages and Jewish values and morals. So it's been a while, so it's good to get back into it. Yeah, so they tell a story of a poor Jew that was holding a very heavy load, and he was traveling down the road. He was carrying it on his back, and then a wagon driver comes past and says, "Let me help you. Come sit inside my wagon. You can relax." And he says, "Thank you so much." He gets up, and he's sitting inside the wagon, and he's still holding his big package on top of his shoulder. And the Dubno Maggid says over this parable, this mashal, and the fellow turns to him, "So why are you carrying your package? We're in the carriage now." He says, "Listen, I know this donkey's working so hard to carry us. You're gonna make it carry this as well. I'm gonna carry this." So it's a funny story, but what we learn from this is that it's the same for Shabbos. Very often we think like, oh, if I take a break on Shabbos, especially from work, if I don't have my business open on Shabbos, then who's gonna carry my package, my peckle? Who's gonna pay me my salary? How am I gonna make money? Remember, we're on the carriage, we're on the train. So you can sit there holding your suitcase on the train, or you can put your suitcase down. Exactly. Put your suitcase down and let Hashem carry it, because it's gonna go to the same place. You're gonna get what you're supposed to get. Another story about the same type of idea. They tell a story of a Poritz, a Polish landowner. He wanted to give his servant a big present, a gift. He said, "I want to give you a present." So he said, "I'm going to give you some land." He said, "Tomorrow, from sunrise, I want you to walk, and I want you to walk as far as you can, and then by sunset, come back here. However far you go, however far, every bit of land that you walk, I'm going to give you a piece of land that's going to be worth it, and that's really going to be the only land that you need." So he, to cut the story short, the servant walked and walked and walked and walked, and he ran and he put so much effort in, and he turns around and he went a bit further than he should have gone. He turns around, he comes back just in time for the right time, and and he works extra hard. He opens another branch. He goes. He doesn't see his family so much. It's a parable for people that are working too hard. And finally he comes back, and it's sundown, and he's finished this 24 hours, this 12 hours full day of working. And the pirate said, "You know what? I'm going to give you exactly what you need right now." And he takes an area 6 by 4, and he digs it out, and he says, "This is all you need." What's the parable? The parable is that this is the life, right? We spend our life running and running and running and running and running and running to achieve something, and in the end we don't even need that thing, all that money and that wealth, and all we need is a little piece of land, you know. So that was the message that the poet was trying to give. So that's really what Shabbos is about. We'll finish with this for the Shabbos part. Shabbos is, as we say in the songs, me'en olam haba. It's a taste of olam haba. What does that mean? It's a taste of the world to come. It's a taste of the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that everything that we do is for a higher purpose. We can't bring money with us. We can't bring, physical items with us. All we can take with us is our spirituality, our tefillah, our Torah, our family time, our merits, our legacy, etc., etc. Those are the things that we focus on Shabbos, because Shabbos is a day where we look beyond the physical. It's the metaphysical. When we look beyond, and that's what we focus on Shabbos. That's why Shabbos is such a valuable, such a core item. It's a bris, it's a covenant between us and Hashem. Why is it? It's not just another mitzvah, you know. It's so core to who we are as a nation, because it defines what we're here for. If we don't have Shabbos, then it shows the whole week we've lost track of what our purpose is. When we have Shabbos, it shows that the whole week is we're doing the right thing for the right reason, and on Shabbos we have the ability to stop. It's like in yeshiva, many people used to smoke, unfortunately, and then they would try to quit when they got married. And most people managed, and no, not I wouldn't say most people smoke, but 15, 20%, too many people smoke. And it was always clear to me that there were some people that had a cigarette once in a while, but they were in control. They could decide when they say, "I'm not," and there were some people that the cigarette defined them. After a meal, the cigarette said, "Go outside, have a cigarette now." Their lives were being dictated. They tell a story about Napoleon, a similar thing, where he was once in the middle of a battle and he decided he wants a cigar, but not just any cigar, a really good cigar. So he changed the whole battle plans. They traveled for 3 days. and they got him this cigar, and he put it in his mouth, and then he took it and he broke it. And he said, "What do you mean? We traveled all this way just to get you this really good cigar." He said, "Napoleon rules the cigar. The cigar doesn't rule Napoleon." He realized at that moment that that the boss was the cigar. So who's leading who? When a dog is leading, when a dog is walking, sometimes it looks like the dog is leading the master because the dog is going in front. But who's really leading behind? So who's the boss in my life? Are my needs and my wants and desires, or is it I'm the boss? I call the shots. Well, how do we know? Shabbos. Can we stop? Can we pause? Can we chill on Shabbos? And that shows if we're in control. That's why Shabbos is so intrinsic. Okay, so the next section is about rituals and Judaism and morals in general. And I like this part because it starts with a lot of statistics, which they put together as part of the course. And it's very, very interesting. We often talk about this, but not at this level. So just some interesting facts, which kind of will shock you a little bit and remind us of the importance of Torah values and not just getting, going along with they say, how do you know a fish is alive? If you put it in the sea and it can swim upstream, in a river, can it swim upstream? Every fish can go downstream. Only a fish that's alive can swim against the current. Mm. So as Jews, sometimes it feels like we're swimming against the current. We're trying to uphold Torah values and everything. People say, "Oh, it's old-fashioned," and give it up. If you ever see social media and there's like a religious post, some of the comments will be like, "Oh, they made up a religion and then they made up the rules," and it feels very, And when you look at these things, it reminds you, "Oh, that's why. That's how we know it's true. This is why we stick to it because without it, everything falls apart." So the average, this is some statistics, right? In 2000, the United States Bureau of Census said the average marriage in America lasts, guess how many years?
7.
Exactly, 7 years. Wow, that's very impressive. 7 years.
7-year itch is a very common phrase that
Oh,
people,
yeah?
that people been together about 7 years and they start getting, maybe I don't know, maybe there's something better out there, maybe, yeah, there's this 7-year itch is a very common phrase.
But the crazy thing about it is 50 years ago, the average marriage was 30 years. So it hasn't just gone down by like 5%. It's like it's completely destroyed. Right? Right? 1 out of every 2 marriages ends up in divorce. And then 75% of them later remarry. 50% of all the kids under 13, that are about 60 million kids are living in a household they're not actually married, they're just partners. Yeah. What else? Children under the age of 15, the rate of suicide in the US is twice what it is in the rest of the world. Kids under the age of 15. Now, you remember, America's looked to as a leading country in the world. Like everyone wants to be in America, be like America, everyone wants to be in America, right? I mean, I know I'm trying to get a visa now. It's impossible. Everybody wants to be in America. Why? Because America's seen as prosperity, the future, the Western world. Well, if you look at the actual numbers of, things like suicide, which dictate depression and all those mental diseases, you see that it's actually higher in the beautiful Gan Eden and the beautiful utopia of the epitome of the Western world, right?
Materialistic.
When you talk about suicides that have guns, it's 11 times other countries. If you talk about, 10% of all television has couples that are doing something immoral that's designed to, and by the way, kids see this as well. On MTV, they took an example. 60% of all clips have some kind of immorality or nudity or something to be provocative, clothing and all that kind of thing. The average kid has seen on TV or on their devices 12,000 murders, rapes, and assaults every year. Average kid sees 12,000 every year. And they 14,000 immoral references and curse words, etc. So you kind of get the the trend, and the same goes for how many people are drinking and how many people drink to get drunk and drink more often. 1 in 4 college women have been raped or have suffered attempted rape. It goes on and on and on and on. The idea that suicides in the U.S. now outnumber homicides by 3 to 1. I mean, it's sorry, 3 to 2. I mean, it's vastly more frequent. This is an interesting one. How much gets stolen from shops every year?
Depends where. California?
California, a lot. No, but total America. Yes, this one.
Probably not. What year are we talking?
2004. This is actually back in the day.
Mm,
10.
two,
Okay, go.
2 billion?
That's pretty good. More than 10 billion.
Mm,
$10 billion. It's unbelievable. You know who pays for that? We. When the price goes up.
right.
It's like two.
That's 25 million a day.
It's 2 billion or 3 billion a year in New York and Los Angeles.
That's
Each
where it
city,
is. That's where I
every
heard
year. It's
that
been
stat.
lost money in the
It's
same
unbelievable.
by theft.
That's 25. They're right. It's 25 million a day.
Right.
You're talking about like, in Iran, if you steal, they chop your hand off. I mean, it's like, teachers being victims of crimes. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So the reason why we bring these statistics is because it's very easy to lose the forest, lose the trees in the forest, where you see a beautiful country and nobody's highlighting these numbers. You're not going to see them in a newspaper, but you can research them. It's completely, and unfortunately, these numbers are from 20 years ago. Right now, I don't even want to check what these numbers are, but I know they're higher. But it's this idea that for example, back in the 90s, actually before that, I think it was 60s, 70s, they said, oh, we're going to promote freedom for women to do whatever they want. I'm talking about from an immoral perspective, and it's going to be emboldening for women. It did the exact opposite. The numbers of rapes and that just skyrocketed since then, and it's the consistent theme that when the so-called Western values of do whatever you want, there's no higher power, there's no judgment, YOLO, which stands for you only live once, just jump from a cliff and do these crazy things. It ends up doing the exact opposite. That liberty and freedom, right? That's what America's. That's not called freedom. When you're chasing after drunkenness and desires and drugs and fentanyl and all the things that are plaguing this country, the entire world, it's the exact opposite of freedom. But there's this giant illusion, for lack of a better word, it's this giant illusion that this is the free world, and then meanwhile, Arab countries, which they have some rules which are way too restrictive, not going to and they murder and kill on a dime sometimes. But on the other side, when you're talking about all these statistics, completely non-existent. You talk about suicides, you talk about some of them yes, some of them not. So it's like an illusion where it's like everything in the West. So that's why, as a baseline, we have to realize that there has to be somewhere else we get our morals from. Because if we get our morals from the newspaper or from what the celebrities in Hollywood are depicting should be the future and the outlook in the Western world, this is what we end up with, right? We have the situation where we are now. And this is not just pie in the sky numbers. You can speak to people. I know a psychologist that works at the College of Charleston right now. And more than 25% of all teenage students at the moment suffer from some disease, mental illness. And this is, official. It's not like it's depression, very, very serious depression. Self-harm has gone up a huge amount. There's studies that have come out. ADHD, ADD, huh?
They attribute it to social media.
Right. Yeah, they do say since 2010 it went up a lot because of social media.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they're going to ban TikTok here in a few days.
Yeah, but that's just one. Another one will pop up. That's not.
Right.
True.
Yeah.
You know what? Like the situation that you said, we can say let din and let dayan.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what it is.
Let
No
din, let
judgment
dayan, yeah.
and no judges. So
Right.
like you can do whatever you want. I think that it has to do a lot. The way I see that the religion is becoming something not
Yeah,
important, and people are actually converting God with something else, and that's what is destroying the society.
Right. They're trying to fill that hole with something else. And
That's very, very true. It's very, very true. Yeah. I said this when I was a kid in England. They started giving out like little boxes for people to recycle in. Now, recycling is great, you know, and we recycle. But I remember thinking to myself, like, this is going to go much, much bigger than it is now. And in England now, they don't take your regular trash. They only take it once every 4 weeks because they're trying to force people to recycle. And in Jewish houses, it's like it's limit. So we have 4 bins in England: one for glass, one for plastics, one for cardboard, another one for compost, and then the smallest one we have is general. And you can only get a small one of them, and they only collect it once every few weeks. And I remember thinking to myself, like, yeah, if people want to recycle, of course you should, but like, and it's a positive thing for the world, and we have to care about the world. But when you make it into a religion, now that's your religion, right? When you don't have a God, you have to find something else. So maybe recycling, which is actually one of the best ones for it to become, because for many others, it becomes something which is completely opposed to morals and values. But I remember thinking to myself, this box is going to grow, and it did. In England, it's like when I came here, I was like, we get 2 bins, and they take them every week. Wow, this is heaven, you know. I tell my family in England, they think this is crazy. In England, you know, it's crazy. So, again, it's a positive thing in moderation. Everybody should look after the world, but to make that into the religion, then it shows a void. It shows a vacuum of a
Absolutely.
right. So I completely agree with that. Yeah. So that's the baseline. Now, how do we know what the Torah's morals are? Right. Some of them are clear. Don't kill. Don't steal. You know, you can read the Ten Commandments, etc., etc. So the parishes which we just finished, which are Bereshis, which are Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the tribes, and all that, that people often think, oh, it's just a Torah telling stories. Every story in the Torah is there to teach us a lesson, well, not just one lesson, many, many different lessons. So this is called in Hebrew Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. The actions that our forefathers, that our ancestors did, is supposed to be a sign. So when we see Avraham's kindness, we see that we have to be kind, not just to people that are like us, we should be kind to everyone. Avraham welcomed everyone in. From here we learn values. We see Yitzchak, who was you know, in a way fearsome, but also in a way very gentle. We see Yaakov, who studied and had a lot of persecution in his life and just kept going, and someone tried to murder him. We see how did he deal with that. We see that he cared about little jugs. You know, he risked his life essentially to go over a river to get little jugs. And we see how Joseph dealt with trying to, you know, be killed by his brothers and being thrown into a pit and taken down to Egypt, and how he dealt with that and overcame. And all of these things are not just hypothetical stories. They're both lessons for us, and they're supposed to be in our DNA. We're supposed to learn from it and change to have that ability to be able to overcome adversity, whatever it is that we're learning from. So that's how we learn from those values.
You know, if I in the parasha with Yosef, the last parasha, it says, when he said to his brother, and Yosef. So it's kind of a message to all of us that we need to come to a point that we would say, I'm Yosef.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Which means like the way he lived his life, that he could put all the past in the past. He didn't forget it, but he knew how to make what is the best, and how did he come one of the greatest people. Not only as the assistant to the king, what he became as a Jew, as a person, which is a symbol for all of us.
100%. Yeah. The Gemara talks a lot about this line, Ani Yosef. It also talks about the other side of it, when the brothers got a shock. They couldn't speak because suddenly everything made sense. They suddenly realized, wait, so all the time this was him, and he set us up, and he put the money back in the baskets, and he sent us back and forth, and he took his brother, and he took his other brother, Binyamin. Everything suddenly, and they say the same thing's going to happen to us when we get up to heaven after 120. We're going to have this one moment of like, oh my, like, you know, we got everything wrong, or, you know, what I thought was important is not really that important. And the things that I forgot and I didn't spend enough time with, that's what's important. And we're going to have this. And the Gemara says that one of the sages, I think Rabbi Yossi, every time he saw Ani Yosef, he started crying, because he realized when we get up to heaven, we're going to have a much, much bigger shock than the brothers had when Yosef revealed himself. And we're going to be like, wow, you know, we're going to have, that's why it's called the Olam HaEmet, the world of truth. My grandmother used to always say, I have a lot of blessed memory. She used to always say, I have lots of questions, but I don't ask them because I don't want God to call me and tell me the answers. Because when we get up to heaven, we're going to have all the answers. And right now, well, why was there Holocaust? And why was there this? Why was there that? A different theory and all that. We have lots of questions. all the answers we'll get after 120. Right now, I'm happy to be alive and have some questions. So that's what she used to say. And that's the message of Ani Yosef, that there's this clarity. On his side, he overcame everything. He was still the same Yosef. And on their side, Nivalumi Panav, they were like complete shock and awe of the clarity of the revelation of that moment. It was like, wow, everything, all the drama, like the previous two parashas, suddenly made sense to them. So, yeah, that's it. And the same goes to the Egypt story, which we're starting right now in Shemos, right? Which is, it's not just an old story of persecution, the Jews were enslaved. It teaches us how to deal with these things and how we didn't just survive. We definitely didn't assimilate, right? This small family grew and grew and grew, managed to leave, persevere, take the land of Canaan, make it the land of Israel, and still exists till today. But that ability to be able to withstand it, we got that from leaving Egypt. Leaving Egypt put it in the nation's DNA to be able to survive. So that's why everything that we read in the Torah is not just a cute story. Instead, it's a life lesson and morals for us. And it's very, very hard to get morals from the Torah. When I grew up, now most people don't agree to this, but when I grew up, it was forbidden among some families to read non-Jewish books. No non-Jewish books. And you say, what's wrong with non-Jewish book? I'm not talking about math. I'm talking about a storybook. Now, it's not because it wasn't kosher or it had, immoral episodes in it. It was just because when you read a book, that the author has a, I would say an agenda, but even if they don't have an agenda, they have a way of thinking. And whether you like it or not, you're influenced by the person that wrote the book, right? So families that wanted to be like extra pure and extra connected, they would say no non-Jewish books in their house. Why? Because they want that everything, all the morals and all the values that we have come from the Torah. Because it's so easy to get influenced by so many other things. They say a similar story. I'm not sure how true this is, but the story is very sweet, about Shlomo Carlebach. Shlomo Carlebach was a great singer. And his songs, as you know, Ben Sia, are like super simple. They're like 3 chords, 4 chords. But they caught on with all types of Jews, Hasidic Jews, modern Jews, before. Everybody sings these songs. And somebody once went over to him and said, like, how were you able to make such pure music? Like, everybody would love, I would love to make music and have everyone sing it. But like, if I'm lucky, I have one community sing it. If I'm really lucky, maybe Orthodox and modern Orthodox sing it. How do you create music that the whole Jewish world sings? Like the most religious and the least religious Jew, everybody knows Shlomo Carlebach songs. And he said, shall I tell you why? He said, I never listen to non-Jewish music. And I said, so what? He said, every bit of music that I have is purely rooted from a spiritual and from Torah. And I was able to make this pure music because I never listened to non-Jewish music. So I don't have any other ideas or inspiration or influences. Everything I have is only from spiritual sources. So he was able to make this raw, simple music that connects to the shepherd in the field and the guy in the workplace and everybody in between. So I don't know if it's true, but this is what they say about him. And it makes sense. If you listen to his music, it's very unique. It's very simple. It just talks to everyone. And it feels like it comes from a place that has no influence. That music is not similar to the music that was made in the 80s. It's completely different. He wasn't affected by the pop culture and everything. And it teaches you the value of having a completely pure source of inspiration. And it's the same for what we consume. Nowadays, we've kind of become very immune to this thing. In yeshiva, we would be studying Torah a lot, and the mashgiach is the spiritual instructor, supervisor, right? He would every week give us it's called a shmooze, a lecture. You got to improve yourself and do this and do that. And very often it was against watching movies. Now, that time we didn't have smartphones. And we used to all think, okay, you watch a movie, big deal, right? And we used to argue that, back in Vilna, 400 years ago, if you showed someone a video clip, it would blow their mind, for the next month. 400 years ago, they didn't have any technology. For the next month, he won't be able to concentrate because he's thinking about that guy who he saw falling down on the TV and he saw a drop of blood, And we thought, nowadays we're immune to it. But I think that's exactly what the message was. We've become immune to it because we've lost the sensitivity, but it comes at a cost. Now, I genuinely believe that every generation has the ability to deal with the challenges of of the generation. So, for example, if you were to take a kid from Europe 300 years ago who's trying to study Torah, and one day show him a color film, you'd fry his brain.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely believe that he wouldn't be able to handle it because it's too much. All he knows is his local water carrier and a local baker. He doesn't know it, right? But nowadays, Hashem's made it where our brains can move really, really quickly. 1 second we're doing banking, the other second email, next second watching video. But I still think with all of that, we have lost a certain innocentness and a certain connection that we used to have. What I mean by that is we fundamentally believe, by we I mean Orthodox Jews fundamentally believe in something called Yeridat Hadorot, which is that every generation is less spiritual than the previous generation. If you go in the secular world, they will tell you the opposite. They will tell you that the older you get, the closer they got to monkeys, and therefore the more primitive they were. Right? So if you went 3,000 years ago and you looked at, or 4,000 years ago, you looked at Abraham, they probably thought he was some hunter, who was like foraging for a rat to eat. Chas v'shalom, God forbid, right? And we say the exact opposite. We say he was so holy we can't even imagine it. And I've had a lot of people say to me, "How can you be so sure? How can you be so sure?" Maybe they're right. Maybe even if we don't come from monkeys, but maybe the previous generations are more primitive and more simple, and we're the best, and maybe we're more spiritual than them and everything. So the reason how we know this is because we saw the greatest people in our generation, and they saw the greatest people in the previous generation, and we all know that they were greater than we were, right? I've seen some of the Torah scholars who were 100 years old now passed away, and these people were like angels compared to us, right? They're like angels. They barely ate, they barely drank. They did is study Torah. They had amazing relationships. Just to give you one example, Rabbi Aaron Steinman, who was a great scholar who passed away in Bnei Brak, he was known as a leader of the Ashkenazi Orthodox world. He was he was, first of all, just an unbelievable person. I went to speak to him a few times about very, very complicated questions, life questions, and he was just but he would basically abstain from eating and drinking. He had a very simple bed. I speak about this a lot, but I think it's like I sat on his bed. His waiting room in his house, his little apartment, was a bedroom in his study. And you sat on his bed. It was the craziest thing. And he had millionaires offering him all the luxury in the world. He had no interest in it. He was like an angel. But you think, oh, okay, such a person, his marriage probably wasn't great because he's so spiritual. Him, if you'd see him, his wife would come in the room, would look at his face and know what he wanted. And we saw this. If he ever wanted a drink, he didn't even have to tell her. Their relationship was so deep. She would come in and bring him not just any drink, exactly what he needed. And it's very, very like this. And we know that generation, and they know the previous generation, and each one was so much more spiritual than we are. And it makes complete sense. The amount of, for lack of a better word, shtuyot, the amount of nonsense that I've seen is 1,000,000 times more than he saw. And he saw more nonsense than so you think of how great every previous generation was, how much they focused on God, and how little they focused on the material world. And you go back and go back and go back. You can only extrapolate, logically, you extrapolate from there that Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, David HaMelech, King David, etc., we can't comprehend how great they were. Right? And that's why we know that it's not we're getting better. The opposite, we're getting worse. That's why when we talk about the time of Mashiach, we say Mashiach's going to come at a time when we really, really need it to come, not because we deserve it. It could come because we deserve it, but it's more likely to come because we need it, not because we deserve it. Because if they didn't deserve it, and all they did was, connect to Hashem, then how are we going to? So all of that is to say that when we think of the Torah, we shouldn't look at it as some abstract book. And nowadays, by the way, I've met like lots of non-Jews that study Torah and Jews who study Torah as like a hypothetical, we study science, we study Torah. The problem with that is not because they're making it equal. It's because the Torah is not just another book. It's not just it's a life lesson for us that we're supposed to get everything from. And obviously we have to study, we have to get a degree, we have to get, live in the real world. But people have forgotten this because we live in such an environment nowadays. But I think it's important to remember whenever we're connecting with the Torah, that it's more than just, intellectual. It's more than just a history. It's everything wrapped into one. And Rabbi Sachs would talk about this a lot. Because people would ask him, oh, what about Adam? Was he really the first man? And people being on the planet. And he said, the Torah is everything, a guidebook for life, right? It's not a history book, and it's not a science book, and it's not a intellectual book. It's so much more than that. It's everything we need to live life morally and properly and justly, and it's withstood the test of time. Until today, we're still studying the same book, and it still keeps us on track, right? Everything else would have to be changed. They change the Constitution, they add bits on every few. They never changed the Torah, but we're still,
That's Torah claim.
Torah claim.
Exactly.
That's what it means when we talk about the Torah being alive.
Yeah, and when you're talking about this, that some Christians look at the book like this, it's a book very smart. Like it reminds me of the Greeks, when they wanted to translate the Torah to Greek, so they saw the Torah as a wisdom, as a book of wisdom. But for us, it's not only a book of. First of all, it was given by God, and you cannot take apart from the book. Okay, so this is the most important thing. It's not only wisdom of book, it's the holiness, where it comes from. This is something unique just for the Jewish people.
No, 100%. Actually, it's very good timing for that. Last week on Friday was Asar B'Teves, 10th of Teves. Most people don't know that there's 2 fasts right before that. The 8th of Teves and the 9th of Teves were considered fasts that many people fasted. Back when they were stronger than us, they would fast. What happened on those days? One of them, I don't remember what ches, but I think Tes Tevet was a day when the Greek commander instructed that they translate the Torah into Greek. And yes, what's the big deal? Translate Torah into Greek. What's the big problem? It's great. Nowadays they translated the Gemara into Polish. No, it's not about being Greek. It's because they made it into a study and they demeaned it. And that wasn't
Exactly.
right. And the rabbis saw this. They saw through it, and they're like, they're not translating it into Greek to educate people about the Torah. They're translating it into Greek because they want to make it that you have your book of gymnasium, a book of philosophy, and the book of the Torah.
On the shelf.
On the shelf. That's exactly the problem. That's why there's many halachas about Sefarim, about books. You put a chumash on top of a tehillim, and a tehillim on top of a siddur, and a siddur on top of a regular chumash. We don't leave a sefer open when we go out. The Sefer Torah, whenever we roll it up and we cover it. Why? It's just a book. It's just a book. No, it's not just a book. It's a Torah which is alive. And I've seen this, by the way. There's older people who I knew. I was once carrying some Sefarim with an older man, and he dropped a book, and he bends down and he picks up the book, and he said, "I beg your forgiveness." "I beg your forgiveness, a book." He said, "No, I don't think you understand. This is it's much more than a book." I'm not saying you have to do that, but there were people that genuinely appreciate it. It's not, whenever we close a book, we put it the right way. Whenever you leave the room, I see people here sometimes. I often go around after shul and I close all 2 or 3 siddurs that are left open. We never leave a siddur open. Never leave a siddur open. You either go to the front page, or you close it. It's considered disrespectful. You're just leaving a siddur with a. Somebody asked me, "Can I hang a mezuzah in my house open, not on the door? I want to have it in my front room. It looks good." I said, "No, you can't just have the text of the holy text written on the parchment. Just staring at nothing. It's so it's a sensitivity that we have. And, we're called the nation of the book because the book has. This is our lifeblood. So there's like halachas, there's laws about how we treat Sfarim. We never put it on the floor. We never put it on the same level that we're sitting. You could put it on the next chair, but not on the chair I'm sitting. Like you think it's just a book. It's not. And even obviously Geniza, when we have to get rid, or it's past its time, we bury it. Are we burying it? Yeah, that's what we do to a human, and that's what we do to a Sefer Torah, to a Jewish book also. Yeah. So, any questions before we move on?
It was Talmai, right? Talmai was the king.
Was it Talmud?
Yeah,
It
that
might
he
be
asked.
Talmud. Yeah, I
About
think
the 70 wise people that he put them separate rooms.
yes,
And,
and he told them to translate the Torah, and they all made the same change.
Yeah, but I think that the Greek were happy, but the Jewish people were not, as you said.
No, they were forced to do it.
Yeah.
The rabbis were forced to translate the Torah. They didn't want to. It's the same. People often don't understand Torah Shabbal Peh. right? The oral Torah. It's one of the most confusing things. It's the oral Torah. What do you mean it's oral? It's written down. Now it's written down. About 2,500 years ago, they started writing the Mishnah, and then they finished writing the Talmud in about 1,800 years ago. And now we have every bit of Torah written down. It's even online, right? So what do you mean it's oral Torah? We call it the Torah Baal Peh because it's supposed to be oral. It was never meant to be written down. The whole idea that was written down till today is what we call in Hebrew a b'di'avad. We had to do it in the circumstance. Why did we have to do it? Because we were being exiled. The sages saw there was coming the time of destruction of the first temple, second temple, and with all the Jews being scattered all around the world, this beautiful tradition that we had from literally from mouth to mouth, it was going to go. It was going to go. Now, why did we never write it down? Because it's not a textbook that can be given over from one person to the next, or can be stolen by another nation or another a race or another religion. And that's why, if you note, the only things that the other religions took was the Bible, because they only wrote down the Mishnah after Christianity was founded. And the Talmud is only written around just after Islam was founded. So they didn't take it because it was still unique to the Jews. And they only wrote it down very hesitantly because they realized we would forget it otherwise. And, the Art Scroll, who translated the Talmud, before they did it, they asked many rabbis and they said, can we translate it to English? Because they felt like that was another stage of writing down the Torah, which was supposed to be verbally told over. That's why they say, why is the Talmud written in Aramaic? Now, the main reason is because it was written in Babylonia. But most books until today are written in Hebrew, right? Most Sepharim are written in Hebrew. So why would they write that down in Aramaic? The answer was because Aramaic became quite a Jewish language. And they wanted it to stay as unique as possible. Talmud and the Mishnah are written, it's for lack of a better word, in a crazy way. The Mishnah, very often, the Talmud will say, oh, this Mishnah is missing some writing, or add into this Mishnah, or edit this Mishnah. You'll have 5 pages of the Talmud, and it says, you know what, the Mishnah didn't really mean that. And you think to yourself, oh, who wrote this Mishnah? Was it like a 5-year-old? Why are there so many mistakes? And no, they deliberately wrote it in a confusing way. They wrote it that if somebody were to take the Mishnah and study it, or try to put it into another religion, it would make no sense. The entire religion would fall apart. Because they had to write down the Mishnah, but they did it in a way that if you don't learn it from a teacher properly, or you don't learn it from a proper source, you're going to get the whole wrong theme. And they did it because it's supposed to be unique to us. The fact that the Torah is alive and evolving, and they never wanted to write it down. And they took the Torah, they took the written Torah, which, by the way, also doesn't make sense without the commentary running alongside it. As we mention all the time, it says do circumcision, but doesn't say where to do circumcision. All these things, where to fill in, how do you wear to fill in? Keep Shabbos, doesn't say anything about it. It's deliberately done like that so that we can transmit from generation to generation. So it's very, very important that the tradition that we have is the key to the treasure chest, which is the Torah. If you don't have the key, you can try to open the treasure chest, but you'll get the completely wrong result. And it's the same thing till today. There's kids in South Korea, a couple of years ago, started studying Talmud because they said Jews are really clever. We want to become clever. What book is unique to Jews? Talmud. So let's study Talmud and become clever. Now it happens to be Talmud is very, very complicated, and you probably do become clever if you study a lot of it. But but it wasn't a concern because the way they study it, they don't have the keys. They don't, even if they have a Talmud translated into Korean, that's not what it's about. It's not a philosophical study. It's not a study to become clever. It's the Torah, which is, the Talmud ultimately is just halachas and laws and details and extrapolations. And what did he say and what did he mean? And that when we live inside the code book, when we live inside the guidebook that Hashem gave us, they're just like, Catholics take everything, very face value. Bible says this, Bible says that. Okay, good. Don't ask too many questions, some denominations say. But we're in the opposite. Ask tons of questions. You didn't ask enough questions. Ask even more questions. We would spend, I think we once, when I first joined yeshiva at the age of 14, we spent 4 months on one page of Talmud. 1 page of Talmud. 4 months. We had books and we wrote things, and we had, you think it's crazy, but that you can, and we didn't even, you don't get anywhere near the end of the depths of 1 page of Talmud. It's alive. So somebody could take it and read it and translate it. You can go to safaria.org and, oh, cute, sounds good. It's not about that. Very often I learn Gemara with people and they're always like, wait, but what's the purpose? Why do I need to know this? Why do I need? It's not when we study. It's not for. It's also, if you want to learn practical halacha, that's something else. That's you're learning to know how to observe. But when we learn Talmud, it's not to learn how to observe. It's first of all to learn the Torah of Hashem, to delve inside, to jump inside the sea of Torah, and second of all, to understand the rationale behind the Torah, not just the simple rationale. Why did Hashem say don't kill? How exactly was the wording? Why exactly was it put like that? What are the different opinions about when he said it, why he said it, how? And all of that helps us literally understand Hashem to a tiny degree, because Hashem wrote the Torah. So if we can delve in the deepest, depths of that, we can help understand it. That's why it's very important, let's say for rabbis specifically, to learn Talmud, to learn Gemara. Like why? Just get straight to the practical. Because if you don't learn how to think like the Torah, if somebody comes with a new question to a rabbi and says, I don't know, for example, when electricity came around, right? Electricity, so many questions, like cooking with electricity on Shabbos and this and that. How did the rabbis know how to interpret it? Well, they had to compare one thing to another thing. Now, how do you know if your logic is sound or not? Well, if you spend years and years and years training your mind in what is a good comparison and what's a bad comparison, then you can learn how to compare when it comes to novel questions and ideas. And the truth is, every question is new. Anyway, that's an overview. So that's really what it's about when it comes to learning Torah. And I'll just finish with one thing. I have seen people, I don't know if there's a coincidence or what, people that study Torah at a deep level, they don't have questions about faith. I'm generalizing, but it's quite true. That means people that are studying Torah specifically full-time, but even not full-time, deep, they're not questioning about faith because they see how deep the Torah is. They see that they're digging and digging and digging and digging, and they're nowhere near the end. Clearly, this was the inside the shelter of God. They're inside Hashem's Torah. They don't have any questions. They're like the child that's being carried by the father on the shoulders. Where's my father? I can't see him, but I'm on his shoulders. I feel him. I'm being carried by him. But whereas people that don't have such a connection to Torah, they haven't studied Torah seriously ever, then they have so many philosophical questions. Wow, where is a God? Why did he do this? Why did he do that? Valid questions, and we approach everything. But the study of Torah itself heals many, many different things, even things that's not connected to, like faith. So, you're not learning about faith. You're learning about random topics. You could be learning about in the temple, how did they, offer up a bird offering? And what does that have to do with faith? But the being enveloped in the study of Torah is like being enveloped to some degree by Hashem and his logic and his reasoning. And it's so, I say this because many people nowadays more than ever, like questioning, why is it so important to study Torah? The big topic in Israel about going to the army and everything, I'm not going to go into it. There's probably a middle approach, which is the right approach. But people very quickly say, well, if some people go to the army, then everybody should go to the army. But it's not that simple. I believe there should be some people that are studying Torah full time. Obviously, they should be serious, not people messing around just to not go to the army. But there have to be some people, because if we lose this connection to the deepest level of Torah, we already, every generation lose a bit of it. But if we lose too much of it, this is our lifeline. This is our bloodline. This is our connection. This is the value of our tradition. And you see how valuable it is, not just the text on the paper, giving it over from one person to the next. So, that's just a thought about Torah. Anyway, so next time we'll hopefully get into mitzvahs and chukim and shema, etc., and these types of ideas.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for listening.